Thank you very much. I feel a little bit like I'm behind a wall here, so I'm going to try and come out from behind the wall as soon as possible so we can really have a good discussion. I'm also, since I don't see a clock, I'm going to try and time myself. Thank you for the invitation. We are living in a really exciting, interesting, challenging time. There are an amazing number of things going on, some very serious problems, some really interesting and innovative solutions. I am hoping that I'll give you a kind of movie trailer about what the new economy is like, or maybe to shift the metaphor, it's like a web page. I'm going to show you a few things, and then you can go back and click on different things that interest you, and we'll talk about them in greater depth, because there's a lot of things happening. So a wonderful writer named John DeGraff, about a year or so ago, came out with a book called, which I highly recommend, called What's the Economy For Anyway? And I want to start with that question and really open it up right away and ask you, what's the economy for anyway? Just toss out a few phrases. Jobs. What else?
Measures.
Measures.
Getting goods from one place to the other.
Getting goods from one place to the other.
Organizing the specialization of labor.
Organizing the specialization of labor.
Provide services.
I'm sorry? Provide services.
Provide services.
Okay.
Elevate standard of living.
Elevate the standard of living. Create prosperity. Anything else? Of course.
To trade
What?
my efforts for someone else's.
I'm sorry?
It allows me a way to trade my efforts for someone else.
Trade efforts for someone else? That's okay. Those are all great answers. You know, the term economy, you probably know this, but it comes from the term economos, which means the order of the household. And in a way, it's a very big term to talk about all the ways in which we interact in the creation of goods and services, in our activity in daily life. And I've worked on the issue of sustainability for many, many years, and I know that the name of this group is Sustainable Belmont. We can come back and talk about the specific advances that I've seen in sustainability. But what I'm doing now as the president of the New Economics Institute is, in a sense, stepping a little bit beyond sustainability and looking at 5 big problems that are interrelated and 3 things that are happening that I think are quite positive. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about first of all, these kind of 5 interrelated problems, all of which you're familiar with. And we won't necessarily dwell on them, but I want to highlight them. And then we're going to come back and talk about things that are really changing. And in all of this, one of the things that I think is extremely important is that more is happening, both on the negative side and on the positive side, than we are fully aware of. And so one of the challenges that I face and that my organization faces is how to make these things that are still largely invisible more visible and engage people in discussion about them. So it's an overused image, but in many ways, we're all on a big ship like the Titanic. And we're all busy on the ship. And we're all doing our jobs, and we're enjoying our lives, and some of us are keeping the engine going, and some of us are enjoying our meals, and some of us are getting ready to dance on the deck. And we are not, day to day, really aware of where we're all headed. And of course, we know that the Titanic was headed tragically towards an iceberg. And one of the things that's a real problem for us is that we are now headed for 5 icebergs. Now, what are those? One of them, of course, is climate change, which we'll come and talk about a little bit. I'm going to mention them, and I'm going to go back and touch on each of them briefly, but we're not going to dwell on it. We can come back and discuss it. Climate change is a huge problem around which we are doing very little as a nation, as a species. That is serious for all of us. And one of the challenges we face in Belmont, in Massachusetts, in the United States, is how can we wake ourselves up to the consequences of what is unfolding and has been unfolding for some time. Another iceberg floating towards us is inequality. We live in a country that is increasingly unequal, and as it becomes more unequal in wealth and in income and so forth, some of the core values that really animated the United States and brought it into being are under stress, and in many cases are starting to break down. We'll come back to that. We're also faced with a dilemma, which is, on the one hand, we believe that growth is the solution to our problems, but growth in a world where resources are limited is also a source of our problems. And we have a commitment to an economy that says, no matter what you do, you have to grow. And we all understand this because when we start as children, what we want to do is grow. And growth, in a sense, is a natural impulse. But we have defined growth now in a way that it means more and more and more consumer goods, more and more stuff, even as the world is struggling to sustain that. We have, and this is a very serious problem that it gets overlooked, our models, our theories of finance and economics, which are different, you can talk about them between finance and economics, but are broken. They measure the wrong things. We talk about the wrong things. They reward the wrong things. Now, they arose in a particular historic context, and they do some things very well, but they leave other things out. And as a result, it's like we're trying to fly an airplane and all the instruments are off. And we're trying to guide a precision instrument, a precision vehicle, and we're having trouble doing it because the instruments are no longer working for us. And the final thing, which you're all familiar with, is that our democracy is increasingly broken. Now, if our democracy were more responsive, it would be able to address some of these other problems. But for reasons we can discuss, because democracy is experiencing so much difficulty, particularly in Washington at the federal level, these issues, which are coming at us in more and more serious ways, are not really being discussed, let alone acted on. Now, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time. I mean, on climate change, I hope that most of you have read Bill McKibben's work. This is the second talk I've given today. The first talk I gave was at Middlebury College, where I was with Bill McKibben. He wrote an incredible piece last August for Rolling Stone magazine. How many of you happen to have seen that? Okay. This was the most circulated article in Rolling Stone's history. And he basically talked about three numbers. It was called the terrifying math of climate change. And those three numbers are, first, the 2 degrees Celsius that we are already on track to increase. By the way, I always think Celsius, you always can't quite remember what that is. That's 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit that we're already on track, that's built into the system, and that the countries of the world have all agreed is the highest we can go. And yet, even though they've said that, we're not acting on it. The second number is 565 gigatons, which is the amount of carbon we can afford to put into the atmosphere without shooting past that 2-degree element. We put about 90 million tons of carbon pollution into the atmosphere every day. And we have a dwindling account of what we can put in before we start to hit really catastrophic levels. And the third number he puts in is 2,795 gigatons, which is what the fossil fuel companies have on their books, in their reserves, that they are eager to burn. Now let me point out something. The 565 is one number, 2,795 is 5 times bigger. So what we have are companies whose business model is to put 5 times the allowable the carbon into the atmosphere with really devastating consequences, and which we are doing virtually nothing right now to address. Now, again, I'm sure many of you are experts on climate. I've been working on it for 20 years. One of the things that's amazing is that we keep seeing consequences of this unfolding, and we absorb them, and then we kind of feel paralyzed by them. I mean, look at Superstorm Sandy. $60 billion in damage. Right now, I'm sure, I mean, all you have to do is look across the United States, the problems of drought and fires. We already know we're going to face those again later this year because the snowpack in places like Colorado is at 2% of what it's supposed to be. There's already a quarantine in Western Mass because of the emerald ash borer, which is a beetle that is destroying forest ash trees by the millions. And these consequences are bubbling up. Okay, so that's one, climate. The other problem is inequality. Now, I could hit you with a lot of numbers. I won't do that. But there's three problems. One is that the poor are getting poorer. The middle class, as you all know, I'm sure, either from your own experience or from observing other people, is being hollowed out. Income rose 275% for the top 1% over the last 20 years, and 18% for the bottom 20%. We have a frayed safety net. And just to capture, again, I can go into more statistics about this, but here's a really interesting statistic. The 6 members of the Walton family, who I'm sure are very nice people, 5 Waltons and 1 daughter-in-law, their net worth is equal to the bottom 100 million Americans. We just put out on the New Economics Institute website yesterday a video that we did not produce, but that went viral, which showed what Americans think income distribution is, what Americans would like income distribution to be, and then what it actually is. And I urge you to go to neweconomicsinstitute.org and look at this, or you can find it on other sites, because what people would like it to be is kind of something that starts here and goes up and then gradually goes up. I mean, nobody is opposed to the idea that there should be some rich people in the world. What we don't realize is that the bottom has been crushed so far and the top has literally shot off the charts. Cannot be captured on the same screen. Okay, the growth problem. This is a very complicated problem because for many people, growth is what they're looking for to bring them out of poverty or to bring prosperity. We talked about prosperity. But we have a really serious problem with compound growth, and this can be illustrated a couple of different ways. Jeremy Grantham, who is a very knowledgeable, very successful money manager here in Boston, he gives an example of what compound growth can do to you. He said, imagine the Egyptians had built some kind of box that was about a cubic meter in size, and they got it to grow by itself 4.5% a year, starting 3,000 years ago. All it did was grow by 4.5% a year. How big would it be now? It would be equal to the volume of the solar system. Now, that's what compound growth can do to you once it starts to accelerate. Paul Krugman has been writing about, we've had an expectation that the American economy and our investments and everything will just keep growing at about 3%. And he's really saying maybe 3% is not going to be possible for us. And I'm leaving out the international discussion. Kenneth Boulding, a famous economist, said, anyone who believes exponential growth can go on forever in a finite world is either a madman or an economist. So one of the challenges that we face, and that's being discussed, is how do we increase well-being without necessarily dramatically increasing growth and consumption? And that goes back to the measurement issue. So let's move on to that, broken finance. I won't go rehearse for you just how bad broken finance has been. The thing is, we think, oh, we just went through this horrible crisis. What we forget is it was actually the third one in 10 years. Maybe some of you will remember the Enron, WorldCom, AIG little early blip that simply blew away $4.3 trillion in the United States 10 years ago. That just was the appetizer. And then we went through an enormous, crazy system, casino finance system, which is disconnected now from the real economy, from where people really need financing to create the goods and services and jobs. And we see people trading and doing counter swaps and collateral debt obligations and all kinds of things that are really games. It's gambling. And it's gambling that says, I'm going to bet, and if I lose, you pay. Now that's a great incentive for betting. I'm going to bet, and if I lose, you, the taxpayer, are going to pay. Or somebody else will pay. And this rolls right into the issue of broken economics. You know, the gross domestic product was invented in the 30s to try and capture something about how the American economy functioned around the time of the Great Depression. And one of the things is that the people who invented it said, the most important thing we want to say is that you should never, ever, ever use this as a single target for what an economy should do. And what have we done? That's what we use. GDP going up or down is the thing that we use. And again, we could go into this, but so many things are counted in GDP. So many forms of destruction are counted as positive economic gains. And so many things that we do that we value are not counted or measured at all. And the really remarkable thing is that economics departments around the country are still teaching the old models. And that's an interesting thing in itself. By the way, I mentioned from Middlebury, where I can tell you that students and this is true all across the country, are saying, wait a minute, what I'm learning, what I'm being taught doesn't match what I'm seeing. And we need somebody to tell us the truth and give us some tools that we can really use. And then in terms of broken democracy, you know, we could talk about the role of money in politics, we could talk about the way in which affluence tends to guide influence. There's a really detailed study of that. I heard Al Gore a couple of weeks ago, he was talking, he used the phrase, I thought, you know, we just have to face that our democracy has been hacked. It's now been taken over by a process that I don't think many of us, certainly none of us would aspire to, and I think most of us would not even recognize. Now, okay, so that's the tough thing. But there are three things that are changing right now, and that I hope to offer some encouragement. Ideas are changing, and you can contribute to that. Practices are changing, and various places are changing, and they all interact. Just as the problems interact, the ideas are changing practices, which are changing places, which are changing ideas. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping we can get to quickly. So ideas are changing not because someone has a brilliant single concept about, hey, you know what? I figured it out. Here's how we're going to organize the economy. And all we have to do is everybody agree with that. A very interesting piece written by a guy named Ethan Miller 2 or 3 years ago. Here's his quote. Beginning from a core belief that people are deeply creative and capable of developing their own solutions to economic problems, and that these solutions will look different in different places and in different contexts. A new economy, or what he calls a solidarity economy, seeks to make existing and emerging alternatives visible and to link them in mutually supportive ways. The core idea, he goes on, is simple. Alternatives are emerging everywhere, and our task is to identify them and connect them in ways that build a coherent and powerful social movement for a different kind of economy. In this way, the solidarity economy is not so much a single model of economic organization as it is a process of economic organizing. It's not a single vision, but a collective process of vision. That's why your idea of what you want to see in an economy is a key piece of the puzzle. And we use the term the new economy. It's not necessarily the ideal thing because many of the concepts go back to deeply held human or American value. There are other terms for this: solidarity economy, sharing economy, resilient economy, sustaining economy, regenerative economy, collaborative economy. But you know what's interesting about all those terms is you kind of get a feeling that there's something in common. And that is that this is an economy that is not out of control, that is going to serve what we need, create what we need, and not destroy the planet in the process. Because I don't know about you, but one of the things that worries me is that we seem to have an economy that has become this huge machine and that's crunching forward towards its ends, and it's lost track of what its purpose is. Now, so the ideas are changing. One of the things I'll do is I'll send you a list of some of the really extraordinary books that have been written, and you may be familiar with some of them or not. We can pass that along, but Bill McKibben himself wrote a wonderful book called Deep Economy about local economies in 2008. A wonderful professor at Tufts, Neva Goodwin, is rewriting economic macro and micro textbooks. She's already produced them. She's now revising them. She's the co-chair of my board. Rethinking what you want to be teaching students in Econ 101. I mentioned John DeGraff's book, What's the Economy For Anyway? Tim Jackson over in the UK has written a book called Prosperity Without Growth, Economics for a Finite Planet. Frances Moore Lepay, some of you will remember her name. She's written a beautiful book called Eco-Mind, Changing the Way We Think to Create the World We Want. David Brancaccio, some of you may remember that name from Marketplace, has done a beautiful film which you can look up and watch online called Fixing the Future. Gus Spath, founder of the World Resources Institute, NRDC, former dean of Yale School of Forestry, wrote a book last fall called America the Possible. And a new book is coming out, Gar Alperovitz, What Then Must We Do?, which goes straight to the question of, yes, there are these problems, what then must we do? So the ideas are changing, and I'll talk a little bit about how New Economics Institute is moving to support that. Practices are changing, and here again, I'm already 20 minutes in my talk, and I can only flag, but you know this. Food systems are changing. People are looking at food hubs and community-supported agriculture and farm-to-table projects and all different kinds of alternatives. In a certain sense, what we've developed over the last 50 years are highly centralized systems for delivering key pieces of the economy: centralized energy, centralized food, centralized information, centralized capital. And one of the things we're seeing in the new economy is that we're slowly decentralizing and networking the delivery of food, the delivery of energy, the delivery of information, and we hope the delivery of capital. Instead of having it all go through a smaller and smaller number of hands who benefit more and more, we're trying to find ways to distribute it. So the practices are changing: food, energy, business. There are new business associations, Business Alliance for Living Local Economies, 30,000 businesses setting up different ways to practice business. The American Sustainable Business Council is down in Washington advancing ideas. You know, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce presents itself as the voice of business and small business, but in fact, what they tend to recommend are the things that benefit the biggest corporations in the world. And that's not acceptable. So you see groups that are rising up to try and offer differences. There are new forms of finance. There public banking. You know, the Bank of North Dakota is a public bank that did not crash, doing extraordinary things. People are exploring that. There are community currencies. Some of you may be familiar with those. There are community development finance initiatives. There are 7,600 credit unions. There are all different ways that people are exploring how you can pool money and deliver it to people who can do real things without it becoming exploitative. There are new forms of governance. People are looking at how they can organize themselves, not just in a simple top-down hierarchical corporate structure, The B Corporation is something that has been, which is a form of corporation which allows corporations to pursue goals other than purely shareholder benefit. And one of the ways to think about this is if capital has taken over our democracy, then maybe we need to explore ways in which democracy can take over capital. And that's not a single solution, that's a different thing. And then the other thing, which I'd love to talk about, I gave a talk about it a little bit several months ago, is the internet is changing all of this. Internet is changing business models, it's changing organizing models, it's removing middlemen, middlewomen. It's allowing for people, I don't know if you've heard of things like the various peer-to-peer systems like Zipcar. Do you have Zipcar here in Belmont? Great, so you know what Zipcar is. Airbnb, which has put millions of, over 1 million apartments in places where people can rent. Couch surfing, which when I first heard about, thought really sketchy the name, but my sons, who are in their 20s, couch surf all over the world. And this is all enabled because reputational systems and exchange systems are set up on the internet that were beyond our capacity, my capacity when I was younger. There's the whole concept of collaborative consumption, you know, where people are actually sharing stuff. There's a wonderful internet site, which I urge you to look at, called shareable.net. And this is where people are talking about all the exciting ways in which people share resources. Because, I mean, one way to think about it on our block in Somerville, we only really need one snowblower. We don't need 8 snowblowers lined up. We need one snowblower, and then we need different people to take turns using it. One phrase I saw on one of these internet sites is that young people today are not interested in owning a drill. They're interested in obtaining the hole. And there's some incredible statistics about, you know, most of the drills that we own, that we bought at Home Depot or wherever, sit unused 99.99% of the time in our basement so that we have the opportunity to make that hole when we need it. So there's all kinds of new models. And you know, where we work at the Cambridge Innovation Center, there are 500 companies packed into that place. Some of them companies, one person with headphones on, getting ready to invent the next Google. But some of them are companies that are imagining incredible new ways of doing things. The creativity, the unlimited imagination that is now being applied to some of these problems is really encouraging. And then the last area I want to talk about is that places are changing. Some of you may know of places that I don't know, but I just, as I said, was in Vermont. Vermont has decided that it wants to figure out how to really create an integrated new economy. All the different pieces, the energy piece, the food piece, and so forth, they're trying to figure out now how to work together. And they have a governor in Peter Drummond, who is supporting this and saying, what's the role of the government in creating an interconnected, collaborative, sustainable new economy? And in New York City, there's a whole new interconnected group called Solidarity NYC. They did a wonderful report on how all these small companies here in the midst of all these skyscrapers can be supporting each other in a new economy right in the middle of the center of finance. Out in Oberlin College is playing a critical role in the complete rebuilding of their local town, and now they're moving that forward to something they call the Erie Crescent Project, where they're going to tackle some of the most depressed cities in the United States, cities that essentially our economy just threw away. Said, you know what, we don't need you anymore, we don't need you Detroit, we don't need you Cleveland. And those cities have suffered, and the people in them have suffered. That's now being tackled. In Oregon, all kinds of amazing things are happening. Partly driven by sustainable design, partly driven by ideas about the new economy. There's experimentation bubbling up everywhere. And right here in Boston, in Somerville and Jamaica Plain, I don't know what's happening in Belmont, I hope to learn about that. So part of what's happening is, if you think of the United States as kind of a huge checkerboard, we're starting to see these things pop up all over the place. And what's happening is that people are saying, well, I don't know what to do. Oh, look at that. Look at what's going on in the town. Maybe we could do that. And then so people are teaching each other. But we are still faced with this problem of disconnectedness and invisibility. The people in food still don't know enough about what's going on in finance or in energy or in land trusts or housing trusts and so forth. So we have to find ways. I mean, there are only 18,500 companies in the whole United States that have more than 500 employees. And there are only about 8,000 of those that are publicly traded. And yet when you open the business page, that's what you read about. Same people over and over and over. And they're very powerful. We can talk about corporate power if you like. But there's a whole other economy, which you see every day, that we never really discuss. And we don't recognize its value. So here's what we're doing at the new Economics Institute. First of all, we're gradually shifting to become the new economy coalition, because we've realized that we need to bring these different groups together. We had the idea that maybe students would like to organize summits with the gatherings on their campuses to raise these questions, to raise questions about their curriculum, to look at alternative models. You know, those of you who have, if you're young and you've looked for work, you know how tough that is. If you have kids and grandkids, you know how tough it is. And people are really asking themselves, what kind of world am I stepping into right now? I have two sons in their 20s, and it has been tough for them. So students are asking, where is this going? And we thought, you know what, we're going to offer a $5,000 grant to 8 schools so that they can hold meetings to talk about the new economy. We put out that RFP during exam week because we were not that well organized. We just got the grant and we said, let's rush it out. We got 72 colleges and universities applying for those little bitty grants. Think about that. 72 colleges and universities like that wanted to engage with this. From 24 states, not all from the Northeast, Arizona, Hawaii, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Washington State, all over the place. And we ended up having the money to fund 14, and those are percolating right now. But we already have a dream that we want to push that to maybe 100 schools in 2014. Because that's how you really begin, that's one of the avenues you can use to change the debate. And we're bringing those student organizers together in what we call the summer convergence. Now, when I first heard that, I said, what is a convergence? Well, I can just tell you, for young people who've been through Occupy and convergence is like the word of the moment. So one thing you learn when you're running an organization is when your young staff says, this is the term we want to use, you don't say, I don't really understand it. You say, that sounds great to me. So we're having a summer convergence. And we're going to use that to organize for next year. And one idea that I would love to have your thoughts about is we want to organize a new economy week in the fall. The title of this talk was, I talked about the rediscovery of America, and that's because I was toying with this idea that, you know, we don't really celebrate Columbus Day anymore. It's sort of contested holiday, we don't talk about it, we just kind of take it. Wouldn't it be great if we could use October as the month where we celebrate the real American economy and rediscover the real American economy that is growing right in our midst? Not something that's far away in the future that we can't imagine, but something that's coming into being right now. So those are ideas that are in formation, and they're already thinking about what to do in 2014. Now, what can you do? One of the things that you can do is really think about your own personal role. Every one of you has a different place in this ecosystem. And one of the things that's happened in America is that it's really, really easy to say, you know what I think should happen? I think somebody else should do something. Congress should do something, big corporate leaders should do something, somebody should do something. I totally believe that somebody else should do something. Well, that's true. You're absolutely right. But I think one of the core values of Americans is that we also need to do things where we are. In some cases, it may be fairly limited. In some cases, it may be really extraordinary. In some cases, it may be organizing something. In some cases, it may be donating something, it may be talking, it may be writing. Who knows what it is? We're just meeting. So I don't know what your skills are, but I know you have them. So these 5 icebergs floating torches that we have to have the courage to face. It is much easier to say, well, I heard Bob talk about that, and now I'm going to go back to my regular life. The courageous thing to do, which I'm sure many of you are already doing, and please don't hear any judgment in what I'm saying, is to go deeper in. What do I need to know about inequality? What do I need to know about climate? What do I need to know about our broken systems? How can I begin to speak about, how can I ask, we have some very good legislators here in Massachusetts. They need to hear from us that this is a topic of interest. So that's another thing. So I want to end with a lovely quote. You heard briefly that I had a long time working on the South African issue, and one of the most extraordinary people in the whole South African story was a man named Albie Sachs. Albie Sachs was a lawyer. He worked for the African National Congress. He had to flee when all the ANC leaders and representatives were being arrested. He went to Mozambique. The South African secret police tracked him down. They wired his car, and they blew him sky high. He lost an eye and an arm, but he survived. When South Africa became a democracy, which was an extraordinary thing, and I was there as an international observer at those 1994 elections, Albie Sachs came back. And after everything he'd been through, he came back and he was made a member of the Constitutional Court, which is the equivalent of our Supreme Court. He became a Supreme Court justice in the new South Africa. Can you imagine what an incredible distance he traveled? And he wrote a beautiful book, and at the end of the book, he talks about what he was thinking about when he was preparing to vote for the first time in the democratic elections. And this is his quote. I love this quote. And if you hear me speak more than once, you'll probably hear this quote more than once. He asks himself the following question: did things just happen? Or did we make them come about? I knew that nothing we were living through had just come to pass. We had willed it all, worked for it, never given up. Never let go of the basic ideas. Yes, we had believed. Belief had been fundamental. But we had backed it up with endless hard work. And we learned how to do things together and to accommodate the fears and interests of others and to survive the sarcasm and disbelief of those who regarded themselves as more knowledgeable about what they called the real world. And we just kept on going on and on until at last the impossible first became feasible, and then real, and then finally inevitable. The challenge for us in this time is to make the new economy feasible, then real, and then inevitable. Thank you. It was a little longer than I wanted to be, but I get fired up, and it can be very hard to dial myself back. So I'm hoping we can have a conversation about this. And what I'd actually like to do, both because I have sort of stiff legs, and because I think this, I'd like to get out from behind the Berlin Wall here, is sit in a chair and come forward. So I'll speak up if you speak up to me. Will that work for you over?
Oh, sure.
Yes, okay. All right.
Do you need the mic over there?
So, you know, if we have time, it can take too long to pull ourselves into a circle. Let's have a conversation. I put a lot of ideas. You may have questions, you may have comments you want to make. Yes?
This is a huge question, and I don't know if you can answer it. But one of the things that the president used is with the population India and China, how can we have any influence over that? Because those are going to become two world powers. I've heard, for example, that China is buying great patches of property in Africa to colonize that. How do we enlist those peoples of the world?
That is a huge question. Just on the general question of population, and whenever I answer a question like this, I'm sure there's some professor of population studies or somebody, so if you know more about this, then I would please speak up. But one of the things is we are seeing population level off. In fact, most of the industrialized countries are already losing population, Japan, Europe, and so on. The United States is still growing, but partly from immigration. China is also, and India are starting to slow down. The reason, number one reason, is the education of girls. The education of girls is allowing girls and young women, but girls, to imagine a life for themselves that is more than having 7 children. And they begin to reorient. And as a result, population goes down. This is a pattern that's been very, very exciting. However, the point you raised about resource use, if Jeremy Bentham were here, he would tell you that 48% of all the cement in the world is now being used by China. And the Chinese definitely have figured out that it's not so much population growth, but as their standard of living goes up and more people want to eat meat or have a bigger house or drive a car or something like that, demand. My son just got back from 2 years in China. Couldn't find a job in the U.S., so I went to China. And he got a job, and they're just flattening pieces and building new cities, and the demand for steel or for copper is overwhelming commodities markets around the world. So that is a real issue. The good news is that the Chinese, because they have a kind of authoritarian government, a seriously authoritarian, when they latch onto a problem, they sometimes go straight at it. So for example, I'm sure many of you know, they decided they're building coal plants like crazy. You could wake up one morning and a coal plant outside your door. But they are also going after solar. And American solar companies have found that the enormous, colossal investments that China is making in their solar industry has made it difficult for American solar, which, President Obama tried to support this, and then he's being ridiculed by the Republicans. Chinese don't have that little problem. They just say, we're going solar flat out. They're now also looking at the question of pollution. People are choking in all of the Chinese cities, and they're just starting to shut things down. So it's a complex story. Getting the Chinese to think through the consumption issue and the growth issue is a key piece of the puzzle. Yes,
Hi, I'd like you to talk more about one of your icebergs. Maybe it's a different iceberg. I don't know. You know Marjorie Kelly?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she spoke in this room last year and about the new economy. And I think she's the one who invented the generative economy tag.
Right.
And there's another author named Douglas Rushkoff who wrote a book called Life Incorporated. And the theme of both books is the danger to the human race of the public corporation, among other things. And so that's the iceberg. I mean, the fact that the public corporation has these economic goals that have nothing to do with the real economy and quarterly demands and no transparency and accountability is really one of the root causes of the crisis we're in. And unless we do something to stop that momentum, there's only so far that the new economy can go to displace the old one. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a wonderful comment. You heard this oddity that I got a doctorate from Harvard Business School, and I did that because I wanted to understand structurally the nature of corporate power. And you're absolutely right, I don't address it here, but I spent 20 or 25 years working on it. And this is a complex issue. Because on the one hand, there's no question that corporations have contributed directly to all kinds of legal maneuvers or legal requirements, the tying up of things under intellectual capital and patent laws, the hacking of democracy. They are functioning increasingly as entities without political accountability. That is true. The reason I don't talk about it so much here is that there are some, and maybe I should, but there are some really focused efforts now to rein this in. I mean, so there's groups like Move to Amend, which is to amend the Constitution to reverse Citizens United. And also the move to deny corporations the right of personhood, which gives them all kinds of special legal authority that they exploit. You heard that I was the founder of something called the Global Reporting Initiative. The Global Reporting Initiative is a massive international system for measuring and disclosing corporations' sustainability impacts. Now, it's full of holes, I can say as the founder, but it now 3,000 multinational companies try to measure their energy use, water use, climate impact. And the thing that's really interesting about this, and the reason it's a complicated thing, is they're pushing it down through their supply chains. So when Walmart says, which is a terrible company, but when Walmart says jump, everybody who does business with Walmart says how high. And that's true. So on the one hand, and there are some companies, if you look at things like, I was just reading 2 days ago, a big conglomerate called Diageo. I don't even know, can you remind me what Diageo does? Liquor and they have driven their CO2 emissions down 85% in the last 3 years, which is an incredible thing. That's what we need. We're all talking about climate. We say about drive down 85%. Diageo said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. How would we do that? And one of the good things about corporations is when they get motivated, they can really deliver. The problem is, as you put in your question, what are they motivated by? Sometimes they're motivated by world domination and control of their industry. Sometimes they're motivated to do some extraordinary new and innovative thing. I think a really interesting exercise that the United States has yet to engage in is to ask ourselves, what would the founders of this country have written into the Constitution if they had the foresight to understand that these absolutely colossal entities were going to appear in the American universe? I think they would have started writing new pieces of the Constitution right and left because they were so concerned about the concentration of economic and political power. And I don't think, here's one, you're going to get used to me, I have crazy ideas. I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a film about a conversation between Jefferson, Hamilton, Madison, and Washington speculating about what they would do if corporations ever reached it. Because I think we would find them to be utterly radical. That the vision of democracy that they embraced, even though they were slaveholders and that, would have been, we cannot allow a force of that magnitude to dominate the public good. And that's in fact what's happening. Yeah.
I'd like to follow up on the previous question with a small local example. I'm part of a group called Sustainable Middlesex, which has several members that are here today. It's a coalition of towns to try to advance regional energy and climate-friendly options. So we find that we reach an impasse as a citizen activist group, even when we get in legislators and things like, friendly allies of a very similar nature to what was just described. Getting an optimal regional solution can't be just a private sector matter or a government matter, it turns out. You need both. So to jump to the end of this story, we're sort of exploring, could we organize as a B corporation, which I've been hearing about for a couple of years. I don't know very much about, but I hear it has some features of a private corporation and a not-for-profit. We know that for our group to go to the next level, we have to be able to accept donations, but we have to be able to make deals of the right kind with businesses. I'll give one small example. The state is going to a regulation for food waste disposal for universities and large restaurants in 2014. That's on the books already. It's a question of how aggressively it'll be enforced. There are small companies that are already popping up to fulfill that need, but they take the waste from MIT up to the New Hampshire border and dump it at a pig farm. It turns out, that's just one example, there's a much better solution called an anaerobic digester. I just learned about this in the last 2 months, which is some giant facility that, if it was located at the right intersection of Route 2, would be near the large facilities, would be the right solution. Of course, there'd be a lot of politics about not in my backyard, but all that kind of thing. But the state is not in a position to enforce that. You know, towns will say, we don't want it. It's not in our best interest. The local option is suboptimal as well. So you're going to get these piecemeal solutions unless you can coalesce around something. And what's the structure that gives us that? This is actually a new economy thing, because it'll be job creation. But we want the jobs to be created to channel the energy in the right direction. We want the for-profit companies to locate it near the big cities, not up near New Hampshire, for example. So I'd love your thoughts, comments, advice to us. We're really grappling with this right now.
First of all, I don't instantly know the answer, but one of the things I want to encourage you to think about is how many hybrid organizations there really are now. In Gar Alperic's book, he talks about that conservatives talk about the free market as though there's only government on one side and the free market on the other. And in fact, we have all these public, quasi-public entities that are pursuing and using tax dollars and other dollars to pursue public ends. And he has a long list of different forms of groups that have come together to accomplish something specific, like, for example, the creation of anaerobic that are funded with dollars, but also function in the marketplace and interact. And so one of the things is that we have to free ourselves. I mean, look, let's face it. The vocabulary that's going on in Washington is utterly bankrupt. It's not just that it's bankrupt from, you know, all the political reasons. It just doesn't describe the real world anymore. I mean, yes, markets are really important, but most markets, you know, work in much different ways than some imagine thing. The other thing I want to say is that government incentives. Well, first of all, I want to share with you a phrase that I learned from Randall Robinson, who's a great leader in the anti-apartheid movement. He said, if you want politicians to lead, you form a parade, and they find their way to the front. And you know, I ran for public office twice. I ran for lieutenant governor in 1994, and I won the primary. And I got blown out of water by Weldon Salucci in the re-election thing. And then I was one of the people that nobody remembered, but there were a couple of people running for the U.S. Senate before Elizabeth Warren got in. And when she got in, she cleared the field. And I love Elizabeth Warren, by the way. But I can tell you that when people rise up and say, we have a specific need, politicians go, tell me more. Tell me more about that. Tell me, and if you, so to the extent you can form a break, I'll give you the Green Communities Act, which passed under Governor Patrick, has enabled a company that my son works for, Next Step Living. We have 1 million homes in Massachusetts that are heated by oil, that are uninsulated, and that are spewing out CO2 emissions. And because of the new incentives built in to create a kind of public-private incentive system, the utilities put money aside for free energy assessments, we're now insulating, through this company called Next Step Living, 25,000 homes a year at an accelerating rate. A company that had no employees 2 or 3 years ago now has 300 employees, and they are retrofitting homes, improving housing values, creating jobs, enhancing local technology, improving your cash flow, and lowering your climate impact, all at the same time. That's kind of the economic solution. So it's very easy to, I mean, I just want to commend you for getting into the details. I mean, I could talk about this huge, big picture thing, but these are the examples that are going to form the new economy, and actually that the young people are looking for eagerly, because they don't hear answers coming in the newspaper, from the television, about what they think they're really work. By the way, you know, there is no known limit to my ability to talk. And anybody asks me a question, I will answer it, regardless of how much I do or don't know. It's a key success factor if you're involved today. However, I would like, you know, if people have a suggestion they want to make just because I'm sitting here. I mean, we should try to engage with each other because you are all out here on a cold night, and the solution really lies with us, not just with me bouncing an idea, although I'm happy to keep going.
I just want to make a quick comment. A number of us, 40,000 of us, went to Washington a few weeks ago.
Could you use the microphone?
Yes, a number of us, few in this room, and 40,000 people went to Washington, D.C. February 17th and marched around the White House. And we do want our politicians to lead. The only politician who spoke was Senator Whitehouse, and he was very good. And Bill McKibben, of course, spoke. But President Obama, who most of us probably voted for, was golfing in Florida with oil company executives and executives of the Keystone XL pipeline. I cannot tell you how disgusted I was. I wrote the nastiest email to Obama and have asked to be removed from all of his email lists. And I'm still not voting anymore. I'm so disgusted. So, just a comment.
Yeah, you had a parade of politicians didn't get it.
That's right.
I have a statement and a question. The statement is that Bob Massie has written a truly mind-blowing book called A Song of the Night, which I commend to everybody, and I hope that you'll buy it. Secondly, you made reference in several ways during your talk to the prospect that we could have prosperity without growth. Our whole lives, all we hear about is the key to prosperity is growth. That's all we hear about now regarding how to get out of the Great Recession, at least from our public officials and our mass media generally. Could you tell us what it would look like to have prosperity in a way where there is not growth, but people's needs are met and people are comfortable?
Socialism.
So that's a marvelous question, and you all deserve credit for coming up with a great question. That's really a simple conundrum, and I'm going to give you my working answer to that. But it's a question that I think we really need to ask ourselves in our schools, in our debate communities, and our town halls, because the question is not growth. I allude to the fact that when you're a child, what you want to do is grow. You want to get big. You want to go out and see the world. And you want to set up a place where you can live. And that instinct to grow and to grow in your mind and to grow in your stuff and so forth is a human instinct. And it's not an evil thing. But the really interesting challenge is what exactly are we trying to grow? I mean, I don't know about you, but I was in Parade magazine, and there's one story after another about these poor, mostly middle-class families that have completely filled their garages with toys, and the kids don't play with toys anymore, and it's just an avalanche of stuff. And I walk around my house thinking, I just need to move so I can throw away half the stuff in the house. Let me tell you a very quick story. When I was in divinity school in 1981, I went to an estate sale because I was really poor to buy stuff for my kitchen, and I came across two cast iron pans, which I bought for $3. Now here we are 32 years later, and these cast iron pans are doing just great. And I'm probably going to die with these cast iron pans. And I picked them up from someone who had died. Now the interesting thing here is that there is an absolute limit to the number of cast iron pans we need in the United States. There's about 100 million households, and we need a total of 100 million cast iron pans. We need, in that sense. Once we get 100 million, we should stop making them or make something else. And I think that's a kind of metaphor. Like, I'm really trying to figure out another crazy idea. I would like us to develop a list of enough stuff. How many socks do I really need? I think I need maybe 8 pairs of socks. And I think they should all, I mean, me personally, I think they should be all the exact same kind, so I never have to. Or maybe 10 pairs of socks. We should really ask ourselves, what's the limit? Rather than every time the TV flashes, now I gotta buy that. And here's a very interesting, my wife wife is a professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. She teaches architecture. And one of the things about the architecture at the Rhode Island School of Design is that they also teach about fashion. And humans love innovation and they love fashion, and that's okay. We like to ornament ourselves and we like it, but there's this fashion process that accelerates consumption. And then there's a different process where maybe we want to buy a coat that's going to last for 25 years. I was talking to Patagonia, and they are balancing this question. You know, they want to sell you a coat that will last for 25 years, but they also want to be fashionable. This is a really interesting core cultural issue. Frankly, I wish, as somebody who came out of the church, I think pastors should be talking about this. How much stuff do we really need? What's the role of fashion? How much innovation? How can we be beautiful without always wanting the next thing? Now, I'm kind of glossing your question a little bit because think about investments and pensions and things like that. We are counting on those pensions to earn a return. We're counting on things to grow. But we have to rethink what it means to grow, what we're measuring, how we're measuring growth, what it is to grow, how long. And there's a whole interesting process already at work, which is the process that goes by the name of dematerialization, which is basically summed up by your Kindle. Not everybody likes a Kindle, but one of the things that's great about the Kindle is I can carry 100 books around in my bag, and I don't have to put 100 books. I love books, and my house is crammed with books. But I can stop buying books, and I can replace them with bits. And that process is part of this reconception of growth. I don't have to keep chopping down trees to really enjoy things that I like. I just want to stress, we're just at the beginning of this. What's so exciting about the young people engaged with this is they're not walking around. I mean, I'm just sort of guessing the median age here. You know, they are walking around with different ideas about where they want to go. Now the question is, can we inspire them with the courage to act and to make themselves and their vision known? And one of the things that's great about Bill McKibben is that he obviously is inspiring thousands and thousands of young people, but he also says, for example, to the faculty of schools that are considering divestment of fossil fuels, if you have tenure, you should get arrested. Because students still have to worry about their records and about their career path and so forth. If you are already old enough to be tenured, you should be busy getting arrested. Because you're now in a position of safety where you should risk something. And that's a message I'd like to share with you. I mean, consider, now that you have reached a certain point of stability, what can you risk?
Just to support what you were saying about only need to cast iron, and in terms of the fashion world, when I was on the granola trail, serious granola trail, I was shopping in consignment stores, Morgan Memorial, and I'm no longer on the same granola trail. But I still shop at the consignment stores, and a lot of people do. And some good things there. And like, why spend a lot of money on clothes when you can get perfectly good clothes at a consignment store? And I think a lot of people feel the same way. That's one thing. And the second thing, this is on a lighter note, I saw a marvelous play last night that I recommend to everyone called Lungs at the New Rep Theater. And it's about a couple that have a very heated conversation about whether they should bring someone into this world and the carbon footprint. And it's a very good play. I recommend it highly.
Well, to speak more about that question, I think we have to get beyond the material. We have to say, what is well-being for people, right? So if well-being is having clean water that we can drink, and air that's breathable, and source of food that is not contaminated, etc., then GDP is just a ridiculous way to frame how our well-being is, but that's how we have gauged our well-being. And I think as a group, we have to start creating a different conversation and stop talking about growth. It disgusts me that we don't have any political will to start to have this conversation, right? Hey, guess what, folks? Growth doesn't work. And I remember when I was in grad school, they said, imagine if everything just kept on growing. We'd be swallowed up in moments. If trees never stopped growing, if everything continued to grow, we couldn't survive. There's a stasis that you reach, and then what? So the question is, and then what? It's creating community. It's about caring about the people in your neighborhood. You know, that's well-being to me, and we just don't have that kind of life. We just are more and more, and we've bought into a notion of what that means, and I think we have to deconstruct it and construct a new one. And if we don't do that, it's not going to go very well for all of us. And last night I went to a climate change event, very good event, you know, really great speakers on what Massachusetts is doing there. And they made some really good comments, and when I went up to somebody afterwards and I said, well, you know, what are the opportunities for us to participate? And they go, well, just go to the website. Well, that's not an answer to me. You know, there are plenty of people like me who are looking to do good work in the world to deal with climate change. And if you say, here's what we need to do, but there's no political will to do it, there's no money to do it, right? No one's saying, hey, you know what, we could get a lot of jobs for people if we focus on this, which will bring us to a place of taking care of one another. That would shift, but we still live in this old, well, you know, we can't really assess exactly, you know, when the next Sandy will come, etc. So we kind of stay stuck in this place. So we need to be willing to talk to one another so people can say, it's worth it for me not to have every new gadget that comes to ensure that my family and my neighbors are safe the next time something horrible happens.
Relating, my name is James. Relating to climate change, I think that we need to develop a better system of passenger railroads and urban mass transportation. I think the commuter rail line from North Station to Fitchburg should be electrified.
You know, I mean, the history of the 19th century and the early 20th century in the United States is that, and you go back even to the 18th century, the founders, the early political leaders were thinking very carefully about what pieces needed to be in place to make this a great nation. Now, some of the language they use is a little scary. They talk about, you know, building an empire and all that, but they knew they needed ports and infrastructure and railroads, and they knew they needed schools, and they knew they created all of the, you know, Midwestern land grant schools, and they had a vision for the future that they were willing to invest an enormous amount in. And one of the things that I think is shocking is that we've lost that. I mean, we are not thinking, just I'm keying off your infrastructure and transportation. Well, I can really go off on a tear here, but you know, the crappy state of American trains compared to the rest of the world, we should really be embarrassed. And it's not that, but we sort of have this sense that, this is a funny thing about America. We look around and we say, well, we know America's the best country in the world, so we have crappy trains, so the rest of the world must have crappier trains. But anyone who travels knows that's absolutely not true. So we, and in fact, in Gus Speth's book, we've lost track of how much ground we've lost relative to other countries. And so we can hear that as depressing reality about the United States, or we can hear it as a clarion call to get our butts off our chairs and to do some things that are in the tradition, the American tradition of imagining the future. Where do we want to be? That's why my question to you began, what is an economy for? What is this country for? Where are we headed? You know, you can't get, I mean, we've got some good people in Congress, but most of them, if they try and talk about that, they're immediately smothered by a by a media that's not interested. By the way, on the consignment issue, how about a letter writing campaign to some super fancy Hollywood star in advance of the next Oscars saying, we challenge you to wear consignment clothes to the Oscars. Don't you think that would be great? And make that public, you know, like get 150,000 people to say, Taylor Swift, who's my daughter's favorite, Taylor Swift, go to the consignment shop. You can do it. We trust you. Go for it.
Well, we were talking earlier about the inability of the political system to really provide the leadership right now, and also the need of us in the grassroots, and so on and so forth. We know it's a mess down there. We know the gerrymandering, the political infighting, et cetera, But I'd like to get your thoughts and your comments at a deeper level as to what you think is going on politically, beyond the surface stuff that you see. But what you, in your thinking, is the core political thing that's at stake?
So America in the past, and I think particularly now, advances in the face of crisis. And the problem is that we are constantly surprised when a crisis hits us, so we're not ready to make changes. When the economy collapsed in 2008, and Wall Street collapsed, and they suddenly rushed around to do Dodd-Frank, one of the things that I really fault the major environmental and sustainability groups is they were not ready with what to put in Dodd-Frank to rewire Wall Street for sustainability. Now, it didn't take, given what I said about Enron and AIG, it didn't take a genius to predict that this was going to happen. And yet, so what did Congress do? They ran around and said, anybody got any of this? Conflict minerals. We'll stick that into Dodd-Frank. And they stuck various stuff in that based on something that said something to a congressperson, and they got it. So one of the things is we are going to see continued failures, but that's the bad news. Yes, the stock market's going up, but I don't think it's going to keep going up forever. We're going to see a dip at some point, a correction, as it's referred to. The sequester may produce that, just all by itself. We're going to see, sadly, another superstorm Sandy. Do you know that 10 years ago, we could have spent $50 billion and switched 1/3 of all the gas stations in the United States to provide hydrogen for hydrogen fuel cell cars? For $50 billion, we could have done that. Everyone said that was much too expensive. No one will ever commit that amount of money. Then we spent $100 billion a year on war and $60 billion to clean up after Sandy. So that's an example. We need to be ready to call for action, the kind of action we really want to see when we hit these big bumps. I think the president is looking for opportunities to lead. I wish he created more opportunities to lead. I think Congress is going to be caught flat-footed on something that's going to happen. And we have to be smart enough to say, okay, we know what we want. We want this and this and this and this and this. And we can start it. By the way, the good news is that there are plenty of really great mayors around and local communities that are already looking for things. You know, the Massachusetts State Legislature, confusing place, but there's some really good people looking for new things. We can start experimenting right now and have things that, that we can export to the rest of the country. That's a really great question that one can start planning around right now. You have a question? The cameraman?
How you doing?
Good.
You started out the talk by saying that the problem, a lot of the problems are because of the government at the federal level, but I disagreed. I think that the problems are here. I think the problems are at the local government, because don't we own the federal government? Aren't they supposed to do what we want them to do? I mean, it seems like everybody is on Facebook too much, maybe, to realize what's going on. And all those people that are at the lower tier that comprehensively make as much as the Waltons, I think they all have cable TV. I mean, where is the dissent? Where is it coming from? And what are the tactics? Where do we need to get?
Well, so to reframe what you're saying, you know, the internet is the new opiate of the masses. And it has an effect, you're absolutely right. However, there are also plenty of examples where something blows up and goes viral and a major corporation or a government will reverse itself overnight. Planned Parenthood debate that came up, the $5 fee that one of the banks put in for, I mean, you know, maybe you think, well, those are just small things. But there are groups now that have organized people into hundreds of thousands or millions of actions, and part of what we need to do is to focus that. In terms of local activity, I just think we need to up the energy. I mean, I have this thing that, you know, if your awareness begins to change, then your beliefs begin to change. If your beliefs begin to change, then your actions start to change. And then as you act in a new way, your awareness changes. This is a self-reinforcing cycle. You see what I've become over 35 years. How did this happen? It's because I started going to these South Africa protests in college and going, what's this all about? And I learned about how the university had investments in companies that were in this massive and despicable regime in South Africa, and it opened up a whole new universe. So it was the actions that drove my awareness, that drove my beliefs. So wherever you are in the process, if you have beliefs, then I encourage you to expand your awareness and expand your actions. If you're ready for actions, just jump into something and do it. Go raise hell at someone. I mean, you know, we're just not, Americans have a tradition of hell raising, and we've kind of, to your point, we kind of lost that. One of my biggest problems with the students today is they're so damn polite. I mean, I understand politeness, that's a good thing, but this is a struggle. I mean, in climate change, just to put it, you know, in a totally happy, inducing way, we're committing planetary suicide. That would be a moment to be a little less than polite. That's why the 40,000 people were great, but it should have been 400,000 people. It should have been 4 million people. And it can be. But you know, we just all have to dial it up a notch. Now I know we're busy and we're tired and we have other things to do and so forth. So just wherever you are, dial it up one notch. And get somebody else to dial it up one notch. I mean, look at me. I didn't want to talk about it, grow 4 hours, so forth, and he can't stop talking. So it's, you know, there is real opportunity. Movement is taking place. It's happening right now, and you can be a part of it. And there's hardly anything more exciting than that. Yeah.
Remember Occupy Wall Street?
Yeah.
That was maybe at least 4 million people.
Where'd it go?
And what do you think is the result of it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I hired a bunch of Occupy activists, and one problem I have is that they look at me and they say, why do we need a boss? I mean, they have such energy to organize and so forth, and they have such a collectivist network impulse that the idea that my experience might be valuable is sort of under debate. But that's okay, because what they have is energy, and they have vision, and they're restless. And they basically look at me and say, Bob, you've been at this 35 or 40 years. How's that working? And, you know, it pisses me off, but they're also right. So, the way I look at Occupy got itself all bollocksed up on a whole lot of process questions.
Right.
You know, who should talk, and who should talk about who should talk, and who should talk about what the people who are going to talk should talk about. And that's what I refer to as the process demons. Process demons can kill you. But they're all still there. Everybody who was in an Occupy thing is still there, and it's not like they're suddenly happy. They're looking for another opportunity. And just to go back to the political question, all right, here we are in 2013. We have about 14 or 15 months to make some progress on some of these questions before we get completely consumed with the midterm elections, and where it's all jabber, jabber, jabber about the midterm elections. So my recommendation for Sustainable Belmont is that you plan some stuff for the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months that actually makes these ideas increasingly visible. I know you're already doing that, but keep doing it before we all have to get, you know, we're suppressed by the midterm debate. And anyway, I could go on. You know, leadership is in scarce supply right now. And if you did something really surprising in Belmont, everyone would go like, what the hell's going on in Belmont? And that would be a huge service to the rest of the state.
I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to plan for an eventual end that where your collective ideas could be shoehorned into somebody else's who's going to be up there and speaking and needs some ready-made comments and some good background. I think that's a really great to do. And for some people who've been in work with climate change in the past, in the last maybe 8 or 10 years, maybe not having that in the back pocket has made a lot of people very tired.
Right.
And saying, oh, it's like moving this huge boulder up a hill, and there doesn't seem to be much backing, except when you go to places, you look around and there's such a big groundswell of grassroots movement, and yet it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. So I think that's more of a comment. You had said a little bit back, let's see if I got what you were saying in order, something about the media, how to get the media interested. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say about getting the media interested, but also telling the truth and not just having spew, and how to make it a place where I thought we used to be with the news, to be able to go and feel that it was reliable and balanced, and not saying, here you get 1,200 scientists who sign the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in agreement, and one who doesn't, and report equally on both, and that's not balanced to me. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to get the media on a side of action.
Let me tell you an interesting story. This is a true story. In the middle of the South African investment debate, there was a group of senior women who used to go from a church in Westchester County. They used to go once every 6 weeks to a play on Broadway. And they hired a bus, and they got sandwiches, and they went in, they had a great time, and came back. And then they decided, you know what, let's go an hour or two early next time and go to, and I can't remember now in my own book, but it was like Chase Manhattan Bank. And let's march around in front of Chase Manhattan Bank. We'll make signs on the way down Chase Manhattan, get out of South Africa. And then we'll go to our play, and we'll go back. They did this. And what happened was, the media picked it up as grandmothers protest in front of World Bank, huge bank. The bank, we now know, had a seizure because they were all peering out the window and watching these ladies go round and round and round, and they're thinking, uh-oh, this is a massive grandmother's movement. And they started recalculating their position. Now, my point is, the difference between what they did in terms of the ladies who decided to do this and the impact was really remarkable. So sometimes, it often goes the other way. You go down to 40,000 people and the president ignores you. But the media, fine. The media is driven by man bites dog. So you have to think about things that are unusual. For those of you who are connected to schools or students, helping them with the divestment campaign right now would be a really good thing. Students are putting themselves way out on the line, asking schools to dump their fossil fuel stock, or at least a portion of their fossil fuel stock. Having a group of citizens show up in alliance with a bunch of students. Students were like, who are these people? That would be great. Anyways, so think, I don't have all the solutions by any means, but there are lots of examples of really odd things that you could do that would catch people off guard. And that is not a substitute for the IPCC, the hard work, policy, and so forth. but it's also showing that you're alive, creative, restless, eager to push the envelope, and so forth. And it's an antidote to what I hear, the fatigue that comes in, where you think, oh my God, I've tried this, and I've tried this, and I've tried this, it's just not working. One more story. Bill McKibben and I, a couple years ago, went out and did a protest on the autumn about emissions. Now, this was kind of dragged because it was pouring rain. So about 25 of us are, and we're out there, on the autumn, and we're going from place to place to place to place. And we went, and there's a place on the autumn mile that is both a GM and Ford dealership. I didn't realize that was possible, but GM, Ford, that's amazing. So anyway, I walked in, and we had told the automobile people that we were coming, because we didn't want to mess with them too much. We didn't want the police. Of course, this is before 9/11, but so we walk in, and the manager comes forward and he says, okay, I just want you to see the Ford Motor Company sustainability report, because we are really committed, I think, to whatever it says in here. I said, look on page 15. He opens page 15, it's a picture of me. Because Ford had asked me to put forward a statement on climate, and I said, I'll do that on one condition, which is you are not allowed to change. I said anything I want, and you can't edit it. And they said, okay, which was a gutsy thing. But that guy practically had a heart attack. Because he's looking at me, you got a picture of soaking wet. With my little sign, right? And opens this up, and the cognitive dissonance. I mean, there can be some fun things in the world of idealism, and I don't know about you, as I get older, I'm getting hotter. And I think that's the trend that I would like to encourage. Now, I have an extroverted, kind of crazy personality, but for those who identify with that, go for it. And for those who have a different approach, go for that. Yeah? We must be getting to the end.
I have a soft voice, so the microphone is very welcome. After this last election, I came to the bright idea, maybe more than a bright idea, that the Democrats had a wonderful model. Lots of people going out in the streets and doing canvassing and telephoning and so forth. If you have a large enough army, you can have quite an impact. But not only that, you put the data in a database, and you don't lose everything between now and the next election. So, since I'm involved with the Democratic Party, I started rousting about and saying, well, can we use these databases, such as Elizabeth Warren's and Barack Obama's databases, to pursue climate change issues? And the answer was no. And that went to the extent of my going to, is it the Secretary of State who manages these things? And I said, well, they said you have to run for office in order to get access, or you have to persuade the candidates to do well. Elizabeth Warren's people were totally wrapped up in hiring people and building offices. So I knew that wasn't going to happen with them, even though I had some contact with them. And so I said to the Secretary of State's number 2, well, I guess that means I have to run for senator. I'm willing to do that. It's only $1,000 for this database. It's too late now, of course. So that's sort of where I stand at this point. And it seems like that's our data, our people. Right. It wasn't the candidate who went out and gathered all that data and did all that telephoning. I mean, there's people dedicated to the database. And we need to use that data, and we need to build on it and go out and do some of those things, such as canvassing, telephoning, and so forth, to achieve an issue, a win in an issue, not just electing a candidate.
Give us back our data.
So you may be aware that the president, since he's not running for office again, first of all, after he ran, they tried to convert his database into a system that would pressure to achieve his goals, but it was all controlled by the Obama machine. And now I think they're calling it Organizing for Action, OFA, new terms for it. But this is a really important thing, and if you're interested, I'll write an open letter to Elizabeth Warren, who's a lovely person, and say, you have X 100,000 people, both in the U.S., in Massachusetts and nationally, and we worked hard, and we have a couple things we'd like you to do with that list. She'll read the letter. She may say, you're kind of asking for the crown jewels of a political campaign. That's what they really guard, is getting that list, I can tell you. But on the other hand, why not? It's part of, I think the point that you made, you helped build that list, now let's help use that list, and not just use it to re-elect the person who got it.
And this is the most important issue that we have.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth Warren could, as great as she is, could use some reminder about that. She's doing great on the banking committee, but she's got to, I'd like to see some senators get arrested. Come on, they're not going to go to prison. Let's get some activity going.
Some should go to prison.
What I really want to express to you is appreciation for the energy that I feel you have, the vision that I can sense that you have. It is, I just want to return to the point that it could hardly be a more important moment in American history right now. We often wish, gosh, I wish I was around back in 1776, I wish I was around, wish I was, well, we weren't, but we are here. And here is really critically important, and depending on what we do now, we'll be either remembered as the people who really made change, or we either remember as the people who just never woke up. And now you're all here tonight, so you're clearly awake up to a point, but there's all the people you know who are ready to be awakened. And this is inspiring, this is exciting. Yes, it's difficult, but what thing is important that's not also difficult? So I think I should stop there. Thank you very much.